I just, I just, I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 88 of the Speak on Peace podcast. As always, I'm your gracious host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, I hope that this episode is reaching you all in good health. Hope that you all are still taking care of yourselves and taking the proper precautions. I feel like I'm going to say here stateside because I know we got international listeners. But here stateside, United States, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. We're starting to see things open back up. We're starting to see certain states that have been in the most restrictive tiers throughout this whole quarantine starting to ease up. I know here in California, we're definitely progressing in the right way in a sense of tiers. Sporting events has opened up. The Lakers and the Clippers have announced that starting next week, fans will be able to be back in attendance for the games, obviously at a limited capacity. But the fact that fans will be at games is a huge milestone. In other states, they have already implemented these rules. In other states, certain things have been updated. We know mask mandates have been done away with in southern states. I don't agree with that, but yeah, man, we're definitely progressing in the right way, and I hope that this continues. I know that there is still this looming threat of this coronavirus out there, and it's still prevalent, and it's still claiming lives. But I know more people are getting vaccinated. And more people are now, even if they're not getting vaccinated, are still taking the proper precautions to protect themselves and their loved ones. So that's definitely a good sign. And I hope that we continue to progress this way because, for the past year and a half, we've been talking about this, getting back to what we know as our norm, as we've been situated in this, what we call the new norm. And there's been conversations and there have been questions about, when can we get back to what we would know as our norm. I don't think we will ever get back to our norm, but if we can get some inkling, get some type of feeling of that is definitely that's definitely great. So huge shout out to y'all, huge shout out to all of us, huge shout out to just everyone, man. Sending well wishes to everyone during this time because we're still living in a difficult time. But we're bearing with it and we're here. This is April 2021. We thought that this time last year that, this thing will be over. Or we will be close to getting over this. So yeah, man, huge shout out to everybody. If I didn't say it already, welcome to the Speak on Peace podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If this is not, welcome back. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Hopefully I'm able to retain and regain your listenership as we continue to move this ship in the right way. Just a forewarning for you all. This is not going to be a long episode. It's going to be a very quick one. We're going to get in and get out. I didn't really, and I apologize for saying so much. I need to get rid of that. But I didn't really want to record this week. I was going to skip this week as well, but I felt like too inspired from this past week to not speak on certain things. And this past week was it was very emotional, whether that's good or bad, in the sports realm. And so I didn't want to miss on the opportunity to speak on that. And I also didn't want to, go 2 weeks straight without releasing a podcast. So here we are with episode 88 of the Speak on Peace podcast, so that we don't, skip 2 consecutive weeks. Man, just to recap this past week, for those of you who don't know, if you don't follow basketball, it was a huge event for those of us who are basketball fans. A huge event for those of us who aren't basketball fans, but, tuned into March Madness. Every year, March Madness is a huge event just because of the uncertainty, the unpredictableness, and just the wild things that happen, the stories that happen throughout this tournament. First of all, before I do get into everything, I want to say a huge shout out to all my folks from Liberty County. For those of you who don't remember episode 63, I had 2 of my friends who were from Georgia, from Liberty County. They was on here specifically they're from Riceboro, but they were just speaking about, how things have been in their county during the time they have grown up and just giving the backstory, a history of where they come from. One of their someone they grew up with from their small town of Georgia, in the backwoods of Georgia, was a part of the national champion Baylor team that won this past week. Not even a part, he was a huge factor in that win and the Baylor's historic run throughout this NCAA tournament. And so I know that brought a lot of joy to that town, to that county, to that city, this past week, just to see one of theirs win. And I always love things like that. I love stories of underdogs or the unspoken or the unseen, being broadcasted on a big stage and being broadcasted in a great light. So huge shout out to them, because I know that this past week was monumental for them, just to see one of their own represent them on a big stage and just accomplish such a huge feat that not many accomplish. Getting back to this past week, though, it was a crazy week with the Elite Eight and Final Four, both men's and women's. Yes, we're not getting away. I didn't record last episode just to speak about what I want to speak about, then get away from it. I'm serious about this, and this is genuinely me. I'm not just watching women because I feel like they need me to watch. I am a fan of basketball. I enjoy basketball. I enjoy the sport. I don't remember if I played baseball or basketball first, but basketball is the first sport that I definitely have loved, even though I played many sports growing up and still play many sports or participate in many sports as an adult. Basketball is truly my first love. It's the first sport that I truly had like an adoration for. So I just love the sport of basketball. I don't care what gender you are. If you're good at basketball, I will admire you, because, like, I hate to be cliche, but like as Jesus Shuttleworth said in my favorite movie, it's just like poetry in motion. It's like, it's great to see certain things be accomplished. It's great to watch certain moves, see people do certain things within the sport of basketball. And it's great to see teams go on runs. It's great to see defense executed. It's great to see coaches out-coach another coach. It's just, I love the sport in its entirety. And so, like most, I hope, I watched both tournaments, the men and women. The team that I predicted to win in the men tournament won. The team I predicted to win in the women's tournament didn't win, but it's okay. Huge shout out to the Stanford women. Huge shout out to the Baylor's men, a basketball team. Those were our champions from this past week in the national championship, or college basketball national championship. Start off with the women, just because of the basketball, the men's tournament. It was like way more emotion for me. I wasn't so emotionally involved with the women's tournament because my team got bounced out in the Sweet 16, the UCLA women's team. But I still have, like, as I said in the previous episode, two of my favorite collegiate and high school hoopers of the past couple of years have been Zia Cook and Haley Van Lith. And Haley Van Lith plays for the Louisville Cardinals, and Zia Cook plays for for South Carolina Gamecocks. And both of their teams advanced pretty far. They both made it to the Final Four. They both made it to the Final Four and then got knocked out. So they did pretty well. Two of my favorite basketball athletes, male or female, of the past couple of years. I had the Louisville Cardinals winning the entire thing, just because I've been watching them because of Haley for the past year, because I'm such a huge fan of her. But also, with the veteran leadership they have with Dana Evans, the coach that they have, I forget the coach's name. And then for that same reason, I also had them matching up or meeting the South Carolina Gamecocks, because one of my favorite players, Zia, was on that team. They also had leadership on that team. It's a fairly young team, but they have one of the best coaches in the sport, in Dawn Staley. And so I had those two teams mentioned up, and neither of them won. The Louisville Cardinals game, the Final Four, they played against Stanford. They were up going into halftime. I think they was up like 10. And the UCLA game came on, and so I stopped watching it. The UCLA men's game came on, so I stopped watching it to watch the UCLA men's game, because I figured that game was over. Come to find out, in the second half, they blew the lead, and the Stanford women went on like a 50-20 run in the second half and blew them out the water. The South Carolina game was a little closer, and how that was determined, but still, that was a good game. And all in all, and I don't want this, because this podcast is not a sports podcast, but I watch sports. I know in the early episodes I did like cover certain things with topics, and here and then I will cover certain topics about sports. But I don't want to misconstrue for anyone who's listening to this for the first time. This is not a sports podcast, but literally sports is the only reason why I'm even releasing an episode this week. And so that was the women's tournament. The two teams that I had making the far didn't make it. And then we had the Arizona Wildcats and the Stanford what the heck is Stanford's? I don't know why I don't remember what Stanford's. I know they're trees, but I don't know what their mascot is. But anyways, Stanford went on to win the championship. That in itself was a great game. It came down to the wire. Um, Stanford was up 2, and there was a couple seconds left. And they were trying to run out the clock, and one of the players, one of the women, caught the ball at the top of the key. Someone who shouldn't have been half the ball, and she fumbled the pass. And then Arizona ended up getting the ball and going down the other end with 13 seconds left. They had time to call a timeout and draw up a play, a one last second shot in order to win the game and try to execute a buzzer beater. Obviously, if you're listening, I just said congratulations, Stanford. You know that the buzzer beater didn't go down. But they got the shot off, and that in itself is enough in order for it to be a great finish and a great game in the championship. Like, that's how championships should be executed. It should be fought down to the wire to the very end, and that's what this game was. So that in itself was very great. Again, huge shout out to all the women that competed in the tournament. If you haven't caught on to it by now, watch women's sports. Not because they need it, but because if you're truly a fan of sports, there's no difference in gender. And what I mean by there's no difference in gender, what I mean by that is what's offered, the product that's offered to us, there's no difference. And so we shouldn't be picking and choosing which one we choose, which one we decide to support. Like, we genuinely should be equally supporting both sports. I'm not going to seem like I'm the biggest fan of the women version of sports, whether it's the WNBA, the NCAA women's tournament, women's soccer, t-ball, whatever, not t-ball, I'm sorry, women's softball in college. I'm not going to act like I'm the biggest ambassador of it, but I do make sure that I tune in just because I genuinely love the sport. Like, I just open with that statement about how I love basketball, and I don't care who it is that's executing the moves, who it is executing the strategies, who it is exemplifying these great defensive schemes. If you're doing it well, I have no problem with who it's offered by. I just love to watch it. And so if you are a fan of the sport rather than personalities, you should invest in that same thing. Because, again, I've seen, and I'm not going to speak on that because I spoke on it last episode, and we shouldn't even bring light to it, but even in this past week, I've seen more comments about the disparities between men and women's sports and why women are getting attention and men offering why they believe by it and why they believe the women equivalent of certain sports are getting less viewership or getting less money. And it's ignorant, it's misogynistic, and it's privilege. And so we're not going to get into it. I'm not going to spew any type of information here. You can look for it for yourself. But we have to get rid of that. We have to move forward this conversation of equality. If we truly believe for equality, especially Black people, and we truly are out here fighting for equality, we have to fight for human equality, not just racial equality. Because racial equality is important, but the reason why racial equality is important is because we are fighting for human rights. We want every single person to be sought at or looked at as equal, no matter what their skin is. And so that should be the same fight for gender. So again, huge shout out to all the women who participated in the women's tournament. It was definitely a great tournament all the way down to the last second. Now, to get into the men's tournament, this one is a bit emotional for me. Pretty sure you all have seen the highlights, have seen the stories of the UCLA Gonzaga Final Four game. That is another game that came down to the wire. The reason why it's more emotional for me is because I am a lifelong UCLA fan. And so how that turned out, it really affected me. I ain't gonna lie to nobody. First of all, huge shout out to the UCLA men's basketball team because this run we put on was a historic run. I myself counted us out from the beginning just because in the beginning of the season, I felt like we were one of the best basketball teams in the nation. And we got hit with injuries. We started dealing with absences on our team. And towards the end of the season, we looked bad. We closed out. We first had that loss to Stanford in January or February. We literally lost to them with a buzzer beater. They took out the ball with like point something seconds left, and De Silva caught the ball under the basket and made the shot with no time left on the clock, and we lost by 1 point. And then, we went on a string of runs, but we had like 4 straight games. No. That was in the midst of that loss. So we had like 2 games to where it was just ugly wins. We had terrible second halves. And then we lost that game to Stanford. Then we had another win at the Stanford. I forget who that win was against, but it was another ugly game. I want to say it was Arizona State. It was another ugly game. And then we went on to lose to USC, went on to lose to Oregon, went on to lose to Oregon State. I can't forget who else we lost to, but we had just like a streak of just terrible games starting with like the end of January 2021 all the way until our conference tournament. And so going into the NCAA tournament, I didn't have any faith in my boys because we just looked so bad. And so that first matchup against Michigan, I thought, let's make this quick and easy. They get us out of here and we reconvene next year. That was a hard-fought game. Obviously, we ended up beating Michigan. I was like, oh, wow, we got a chance. Another thing that I did not like from our UCLA team this past year is how we defended the three-pointer. And the next game was against BYU, who was a decent three-pointing team. We ended up beating BYU. Next round, we played against Abilene Christian, which was a team that wasn't supposed to be there, but they weren't as good as us. So once we got to Abilene Christian, I was like, okay, this is one game that I feel like we can actually win, or this is one game I feel like we should win, and we won that. Following that, we went on to play Alabama. Alabama was one of the better teams I felt like in this tournament just because of how they played this year. I had Baylor winning it all, but Alabama was my second favorite team in this tournament because of they had so many options and how well they played defense this year. Played against Alabama. This is a hard-fought game. Alabama is another one of those good shooting three-point teams, and we end up beating them. Another hard-fought game, but we end up beating them. We advanced to the Elite Eight. We played against Michigan. Michigan was the third best team I felt like in this tournament, in my personal opinion. I had Baylor. Who did I just say? I had Baylor, Alabama, Michigan, Houston, then Texas. That was my top 5. Yes, I left Gonzaga out. Not because they beat us. I felt like this even prior to the tournament because I'm not that huge of a fan of Mark Few, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But we advanced to the Elite Eight, and we're playing against Michigan. And Michigan is another one of those great teams that can shoot well. So I'm like, okay, we made it past Alabama. We're not supposed to make it this far. So this is where the buck stops. And somehow we end up beating Michigan. It was a great game from both teams because it was a low-scoring game. We both played tremendous defense, and in the end, we somehow came away with it and came away with it at with a reasonable difference of points as well. And so I was very surprised by that. So now we advance to the Final Four, and we're playing Gonzaga. The Gonzaga is the team that the media picked to win it all. Gonzaga is a team with the undefeated record. Gonzaga is the team to beat in most people's eyes. Me personally, Gonzaga is a team that is successful year in and year out. I personally have never thought that of Gonzaga just because of how many times they've never got the job done. And what I mean by that is in the past 21 years, Gonzaga has had the same coach. That's 21 seasons. Within those 21 seasons, they've only lost more than 8 games twice. And that was like early on. I believe it was like 2004. And my years are probably way off. But it was around that time. It was like 2004. And it may have happened again like 2009 or 2010 or something like that. Those are only 2 years that they have lost more than 8 games. That record in itself is a great feat. Because you can pick whatever program you want. Not too many programs go that far for that long without losing more than 8 games. Like 8 games is average for a good team. For a great team, like super great team, over 20 years, they probably won't go no more than losing 5 games. But to not lose more than 8 games in a 21-year average is unheard of. And so I say all that to say that in those 21 years, they have only lost that many games twice. But also in those 21 years, they have only had a winning record against AP top 25 teams 4 times. For those of you who don't follow basketball, AP top 25 teams are the teams that media select week in and week out to be the top 25 in all of college basketball. So think that, Team A plays Team B on Monday, and then Team A plays Team C on Wednesday, and they lose to Team B but beat Team C. But Team A on Monday was the number one ranked team. By the time Sunday comes around, they're not going to be the number one ranked teams because they lost, and it may have been the team behind them that won. And so this is what the top 25 ranking is. So the top 25 ranking is the top 25 teams in all of Division I college basketball. Think about that. And that is a huge, huge, huge number of participants in college basketball. Now, with that information, take the fact that they have only had a winning record against top 25 teams 4 times in 21 years. That should say something. That should spark a flag. But what I mean by a winning record is they played 4 top 25 teams. Let's just say, it's not actual, but let's just say, give you an example. They played 4 top 25 teams every year, and they at least have a 3, or they played 4, they had to have a 3-1 record because that's a winning record. So if they played 5 top 25 teams every year, they would at least have to be 3-2 every year. And in 21 years, they have only had a winning record 4 times. That sparks a red flag to me. That tells me that you're probably not playing the best of teams if you go 21 years and you only have a winning record 4 times out of 21 years. I'm not a mathematician, but 4 out of 21 sounds a lot like about 20% of the time they beat a top 25 team. So you have to take that into account. Now you erase all of that, and now we examine in the 21 years in a broader scope. They've had the same coach for 21 years. No, we're not going to erase all that. They have the same coach for 21 years. They have only lost more than 8 games twice. They have only had a winning record versus top 25 teams 4 times, yet they have never won a national championship. That sparks a red flag to me. That tells me that for you to be this successful, but to not have a winning record against the top teams, it may have to do something with your schedule. And I'm not hating on Gonzaga. I don't really care about Gonzaga, but this is why I was going into that game with UCLA against Gonzaga and saying that, we got a chance to make it to the national championship. And I felt like we should have made it to the national championship, but we got beat. But this is why I was optimistic about us making it to the national championship, because that team wasn't invincible. It was the matter of the fact that I feel like Mark Few just doesn't get the job done on a big stage. And if you've seen how the national championship played out, you know you know what happened. They got blown out by the Baylor Bears, and that wasn't a surprise to me. But anyways, going into the game, going back into my mind state with the UCLA versus Gonzaga game. So leading up to the UCLA Gonzaga game, I was trying to, because they haven't lost any games. So I was trying to depict or trying to watch, because I'm a fan of basketball, who they played and who gave them the best run. And the best run they've had and the best competition they had was against one of their, before I even get to that, I know I'm jumping all over the place. Before I get into that, the reason why I gave you all that backstory about the history and all that stuff is to tell you that the reason why Gonzaga is successful year in and year out is because they are in a weak conference. And so they're able to breeze through weak teams year after year and only play good teams every now and then. Even though they do play the good teams, they're not always beating them. And so because they're not always beating them, and you mix in the fact that they're playing weak teams, or the majority of their schedule is consistent of weak teams, that is going to boost their record. That's going to boost their win column, because they don't have to play against too many people. You take a school like Baylor that has to play against Texas Tech and Texas and Kansas and Oklahoma and teams like that. Their record is not going to be that perfect. And if it is perfect, that means they're a very good team because they're playing against great competition. You take a team like Florida that has to play against, or you take a team like, not even Florida, we're not going to go that far, but take a team like Syracuse that has to play against the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Florida States and things like that. they're not going to have the best season because they're playing against the top talent in the country. And because the top talent in the country are going to the rival schools, they have to prepare for that. You take a team like UCLA, and we got to play against Oregon, we got to play against USC, you got to play against Arizona, places where some of the top talent in the country are going to. We are going to have problems. But Gonzaga skates year in and year out without having to do that. And so because of that, I felt like they were beatable. Obviously, we didn't beat them, but they ended up getting beat. But anyways, just to fast forward and go through the game, a little quick summary. We played a damn good game. Like, we wasn't supposed to make it this far. And we made it this far, and we gave, quote unquote, the best team in the country a run for the money. What I love most about this run or this game period is because it was the coaching. Mick Cronin has came into UCLA. He's done a hell of a job. This man has turned the program around in 2 years, something that in my lifetime I have not seen a coach do. Ben Howland was a great coach. Steve Alford was a terrible coach. But just to see us make the best, quote unquote, the best team in the country play at our pace, it was beautiful. Because when you control the pace of the game with a team like that that's running up and down the court, it shows how great, for one, it shows how great a team is coached. For two, it shows how poised the members of that team are to be able to execute a coach's game plan. And they did that damn well because we had to go into we lost in overtime. We should have won in regular. We should have run in, what is it, regular time? Well, I can't think of the word. We should have run in regulation. I said regular time. We should have won in regulation, but we didn't, and we took it to overtime, and we literally got beat by the quote unquote best team in the country by a buzzer beater in overtime. That in itself is a feat. But the reason why I'm so proud of this team is because the identity of UCLA has changed. For those of you who are not local to LA, we know the perception of UCLA. UCLA is Westwood. Westwood is the privileged kids. If you're privileged, you go to UCLA to play sports. If you're not privileged, you go to USC, which is smack dab in the middle of the hood. But that is the perception of UCLA, especially as of late. And we have played some of the best defense I've ever seen during this tournament run as Bruins. And that just tells me that the mentality of UCLA has changed. Like, we have dogs in our program now. What I mean by dogs, I mean that people that's not scared to get scrappy, people that's not scared to get dirty, people are not scared to do the intangible things. And I couldn't ask for more as a fan of the UCLA Bruins. So huge shout out to them in their run. Huge shout out to everybody on the team. I'm not going to single anyone out, but we know who really, really showed up. But it was really just a team effort from the point guard to the 6th and 7th man. We really, really, really played our butts off. So hats off to UCLA. Fast forward past that, we lost in the buzzer beater. That in itself was emotional. I still haven't processed that, but it was like a very hard game to watch. But fast forward to national championship, Gonzaga advanced to play against Baylor, and Baylor just smacked them. It's no deep dive here. They got smacked, and that was expected. Baylor has been, despite what their ranking was, their AP ranking was, Baylor has been the best team in basketball all year. Maybe for like a week or two they weren't. Activities got paused because of COVID, and I remember they went into like a pause and came out, and I think they lost a game, and then they played another game and they won like narrowly. That was the only time I wouldn't say Baylor wasn't the best team. But all year round, I feel like Baylor has been the best team in basketball, and they proved it by winning a national championship. So once again, huge shout out to the Baylor's basketball team for that. I already said this episode is not going to be long, so I'm going to stay true to my word. The last thing in regards to sports was this incident, not even an incident, but what's going on with MLB. So the MLB All-Star Game was scheduled to be in Georgia this year, but the MLB aligning with the times and aligning with what's right, they pulled the game out of Georgia because of all that's going on with Georgia, Georgia's government trying to effectively eradicate voters' privileges. There's so many things going on in Georgia right now behind closed doors to not make Georgia, to make sure that Georgia never votes Democrat again. We know, I covered somewhat of the election coverage when it happened, and we know that one of the biggest surprises was how Georgia voted in this past election. And so now the elected officials within Georgia are doing whatever they can in their power to never make Georgia a red state again. And some of those things are taking away voter privilege, not allowing voters to vote a certain way, now allowing voters, if there's mistakes on ballots or mistakes in registries, exempting them from voting, um, um, charging voters with crimes for doing certain things like handing out water to people standing in hot lines in Georgia and in the hot sun in Georgia. I believe like passing out snacks is also considered a felony or crime in Georgia now in election line. So they're doing like whatever they can to, in a nutshell, they're doing whatever they can to not to diminish the amount of colored people who vote in Georgia. And I don't know how they're getting passed, but if right now they're doing so effectively. They're passing some heinous laws to make sure that this doesn't happen. And the MLB recognized that and they didn't align with it, so they pulled the All-Star game out of Georgia. So the Texas governor, I believe, had an appearance to throw out the first throw at the Texans baseball game. I don't know if it was the Texans or Astros, but this week was opening week for the MLB, and so the Texas governor was scheduled to throw out the first pitch for one of those games, and then he rescinded his opportunity to do so because of the MLB removing the All-Star game from Georgia because of what they're doing in voting rights. And this shouldn't surprise any of you. You can guess what type of state Texas is, so you can guess what type of governor Texas has. But it just goes to show the genuinity is not a word, but the genuinity is not a word either. Shows how genuine some people are with these messages. Remember, we talked about a lot last fall and last summer about, there's going to be a lot of companies pulling these messages out to the world, but not actually believing it. And I'm glad that the MLB, a sport it's not a sport that's majority white, but the owners are majority white. And so they're recognizing what's wrong and they understand what their fan base is too. Like a move like that, it upsets your fan base when the majority of your fan base are white people, especially like middle class America and things like that. And so when you do things like that, you are risking certain things. You are risking the money that you can make. You can risk fan attendance, which also equates to the money you can make. You risk upsetting the owners of the people who run your league. You risk upsetting the players in your league. But when you're genuine in what you believe in, when you know right from wrong, you don't care about how you move because you know how you genuinely feel. So huge shout out to the MLB for that decision to remove the All-Star game from Georgia. But for the Texas governor, this is the same idiot who removed the mask mandate a month ago. But it just goes to show, people's true colors. Not as if we've never seen it before, it's not ever been displayed before. I don't know the history of the Texas governor, but for him to be mad at the fact that the MLB is moving in the right way because they're recognizing what's going on in Georgia is not right. And so for someone to be mad at that, it should tell you all that you need to know. And before we do get out of here, my last topic I want to cover is huge. No. Well wishes. I want to send well wishes to the late, not the late. God, Lee. I don't want to put that out there. I want to send well wishes to DMX. He's currently in critical condition. He's in a hospital. He's been in a hospital for like the past couple. It's probably been almost a week now. And man, it's just sad. DMX is one of our hip hop pioneers. When we speak about rapping ability, we talk about influence, we talk about album sales, we talk about culture. DMX is a pivotal person in everything as it relates to rap, as what it is now and what it was in the '90s, especially in that post um, post Biggie Tupac era. DMX has been huge, and we know the demons that he's fought. If you haven't seen seen an interview of his, if you haven't seen a documentary of him that features him, you should watch it just so you can understand like who he is as a person and the demons that he's dealt with and that he's dealing with. He's had a troubled life, and a lot of it has been out of his hands. He's had no control of it, but all in all, like that man is another one of those icons. When we talk about the word icons, talk about the word legend. DMX is all of that, and it sucked to see one of our legends to be going through this, where their health is failing, or their life is being threatened by a medical condition. I don't know what exactly is going on with him, why he's in critical condition, but I know it's reported that he had a heart attack. Y'all can get into the specifics all you want to, but all I care about is that a human being life is being threatened due to a medical condition. I don't care about the specifics. I care that someone who has influenced me or influenced people in my family, or influenced people I care about or people I look up to, their life has been threatened, and that's really all that matters. So well wishes to DMX. If you believe in prayers, send our prayers for that man, because he definitely needed it. Like that's a lot. That's an icon that we just can't afford to lose. I know a lot of efforts have been shown at the hospital that he's staying in. I know there was like a visual outside to where like a lot of friends, a lot of motorcycle clubs have been outside the window or outside the hospital that he's at, just holding visuals so they can send their energy to him, so that he comes out of this on top. But all that is just important, man, because this is somebody that we can't afford to lose. Like I remember some of my first music memories. He's one of them. Like the first song I ever remember was an R&B song. It was Usher's "Nice and Slow." But the first rap song I ever remember, it had to be the Rough Riders anthem. And I believe Rough Rider anthem was one of the first rap music videos I ever seen. Like I remember seeing the premiere of the Rough Riders anthem. I don't know if I seen that first or Drop It Like It's Hot by Cash Money, but one of those two was the first music video. I guess I got to look at the timeline to see like when both dropped, but I know it was around the same time. DMX might have been first, so I think DMX was the first rap music video that I've ever seen. And for me to have that memory of seeing it premiere on TV, like it means something to me. So huge shout out to DMX, huge shout out to those who love him, who are affected by this. Hopefully he comes out on top. We can't afford to lose a legend. That's really all I have for the Speak on Peace podcast this week. Thank you all for tuning in. I know I said I was going to make it short. Kind of went a little longer than I expected, but this is it. Thank you for tuning in to Speak My Peace podcast. If you're listening on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever the case may be, subscribe, rate, and comment as well. I definitely appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, share, whatever the case may be. I definitely appreciate it. Leave feedback and all of that. That's all I got for you. My what to watch for this week, we're going to go with, what am I watching this week? If you haven't seen the Tiger Woods documentary on HBOMax, I forget what it's called, but that is definitely good. Give me a couple seconds, and then I'm going to look up what it's actually called. Tiger Woods HBO. It's called Tiger. If you have HBOMax, the Tiger Woods documentary is a 2-part series on HBOMax. It's called Tiger. Definitely a great series. I definitely recommend you all watch that. And that's all we have for this week. That's the Speaking of Peace podcast. I'm Greg Lacey, and I am out.